we have some very worrying indications of a potentially massive escalation in Israel's war against Lebanon. But before we get to that, we also have some really striking video of Israel, for some reason, using a flaming medieval trebuchet. Trebuchet, is that how you say it, Saagar? Trebuchet.
Yeah.
It's like that, you'll see it in just a second, but for those who are just listening, it's like the catapult thing with like a flaming ball that you might associate with some, Monty Python movie or like Vikings trying to storm a castle hundreds of years ago. Let's take a look at this.
We see several Israeli soldiers hurling a flaming projectile over a concrete wall using the trebuchet, the type of wooden catapult used in the Middle Ages and even before that. What makes this unusual is that Israel takes pride in being a high-tech nation. The Israeli military told us that the use of the trebuchet was an isolated incident aimed at clearing a thicket where Hezbollah militants could hide near the border. But Israeli reservists we spoke to told us that they saw it being used earlier in the war.
All right, Saagar, what can you tell us about the history of this weapon and why Israel might be using it now when, as this narrator points out, they have a lot of high-tech weaponry, thanks to us, by the way.
Why you might be using now, I cannot answer that question. We've done some preliminary research here on the show. Catapults were certainly used in the First World War by Indian soldiers, actually in the trenches, and at the Battle of Gallipoli. There were a few that were issued to the British, I guess the Royal soldiers fighting for the king that were used, but at a hand level. The actual trebuchet, the only thing I can find, and again, this is back in the napkin research, is a trebuchet usage at the Battle of Tenochtitlan by Hernan Cortez's troops against the Aztecs, and that was in the 1500s. So I believe the trebuchet really went out of fashion as larger siege guns became popular, like big cannons. If you think about, let's say, like the Ottomans marching on Vienna, some of their major conquests in the major 1600s, also in terms of the way the Ottomans were able to conquer Constantinople, the larger cannons and siege guns basically replaced the usage of the trebuchet, which was really popular, invented by the Chinese, I think, with gunpowder, then used by the Mongols basically against the Chinese, spread across Europe by the Mongols in several battles, like Samarkand. There's a few others people can go and look into. So the farthest back that we can find the real confirmed use is the Battle of Tenochtitlan, although probably somebody can fact check me and find some usage in the interim 300 years. But yeah, there's no explanation. There's
I guess there.
In 2024, there really is no explanation. This is done by geeks at like reenactments. This is not something usually used in battle.
Right. So I guess since we already had the medieval siege in Gaza, they just wanted to get all the like medieval aesthetic and vibes going as well with this.
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to the news with regards to potential escalation in Lebanon of Israel's war against Hezbollah. You can put this up on the screen. So it appears, this is Murtaza Hussein tweeted this out, Biden is set to greenlight a major Israeli war on Lebanon, the destruction from which is likely to send another wave of mass migration to Europe at a time this is already a crisis. Only France is trying to intervene, but they don't have capacity to stop it. He links to an article which I believe is in Haaretz, talking about how Defense Minister Yoav Gallant rules out joining an initiative promoted by Emmanuel Macron in which France, the U.S., and Israel would form a contact group to work on diffusing escalating tensions with Hezbollah on the northern border. Quote, as we fight a just war defending our people, France has adopted hostile policies against Israel, okay? In doing so, France ignores the atrocities committed by Hamas against Israeli children, women, and men. Israel will not be a party to the trilateral framework proposed by France, he writes. Let's go on to the next piece because we have the IDF spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, directly threatening, saying that Hezbollah is, quote, bringing us to the brink of escalation. Here's the full quote. Hezbollah's increasing aggression is bringing us to the brink of what could be a wider escalation, one that could have devastating consequences for Lebanon and the entire region. That sounds very much like a threat. He goes on to say, when we say we will not let October 7 happen again on any one of our borders, we mean it. One way or another, we will ensure the safe and secure return of Israelis to their homes in northern Israel. That is not up for negotiation. So, Saagar, as best I can tell, you have a very familiar dynamic playing out here, which is, the Biden administration continues to send envoys to the region to try to, hey, let's not do this full war against Hezbollah. This could be really bad. But Bibi Netanyahu, who now, by the way, this morning just officially dissolved the war cabinet after Benny Gantz exited, Bibi Netanyahu has every intention and every political motivation to keep going. And so even if the U.S. sort of like meekly accepts, at the end of the day, they're not going to do anything, which effectively serves as a green light for Israel, as it has in every other instance up to this point.
Well, it's very troubling. As we always say, this would basically make the Gaza war look like child's play, because Hezbollah is an actual very strong military force. I mean, it's stronger than many nation states that are out there. Let's put this up there on the screen. As you alluded to, Krystal, the Israeli military say that Hezbollah is bringing them to the brink of escalation. But if you read further, there has been tit-for-tat action that they cite within this piece for basically the course of the entire war, all the way back from the very first week. Remember that huge portions, and this is what they talk about in here, of northern Israel remain evacuated. It's the largest internal evacuation in the history of the state of Israel. You also have a lot more deaths really per capita of the IDF as a result of Hezbollah fire than anything compared to Hamas. Now, somehow, there's been some sort of cap on the violence there between the two sides for now. Nasrallah famously gave that speech, I believe it was in the early days of the war. He basically said, we're not going to be party to the war in Gaza, but the Israeli military is also using kind of the cover of all of this chaos and conflict to go and to annihilate Hezbollah targets, both in Lebanon and in Syria, which then invites some of the tit-for-tat escalation. And as a result, a lot of IDF soldiers have actually died as a result of this fire. So it's only really a matter of time if we're going to continue the strikes here in Lebanon to drive up the temperature, that some sort of miscalculation is effectively inevitable in all of this. And it's clear too that it may not even be miscalculation on the Israeli side. The Bibi's party, they want this war. They want to use this as a final opportunity to erase all of Israel's so-called threats here in the region, or at least, with regards to Hezbollah. They want to continue the war in the momentum. You can almost think of it like invading Iraq after what happened in 9/11. Honestly, a perfect example, political purposes, using it as cover. But it could be only that in this case, that this time the U.S. could actually try and to keep this, or to avoid this conflict. It doesn't seem like all the stops are ready to be put there. And if that doesn't happen now, then it's very likely it'll just happen already.
Yeah, I mean, just as a reminder to people, Hezbollah did not take hostages. Hezbollah was not involved in October 7th. And this conflict between Israel and Hezbollah will not end until the Gaza onslaught is over. And U.S. officials are acknowledging that as well. I mean, that is the core of the problem here. We're going to talk about the Houthis in the next block. That is the core of the issue there as well. It's the core of the, escalation, which has been very frightening vis-a-vis Iran as well, combined with direct Israeli, outrageous provocations with striking the Iranian embassy in Damascus. So not only is there this risk of a broader and even more deadly war, there's also the risk of the U.S. getting pulled directly into this, which again is something that Bibi Netanyahu very much wants. And I don't think anyone can feel confident that Joe Biden has the fortitude to reject or withstand. So all very, very troubling indications and something to keep a close eye on. At the same point, Benny Gantz, who we mentioned before, was in the war cabinet. He just recently resigned over his concerns about the lack of a hostage deal, the lack in particular of a plan for the quote unquote day after in Gaza, and the fact that Bibi Netanyahu is doing everything for his own political gain versus the interests of even Israeli citizens. He's been giving some interviews, putting a finer point on some of these realities that he saw up close and personal serving in the war cabinet. We can put this up on the screen. He confirmed that Bibi blocked his own hostage deal, stating he approved a plan to return hostages and did nothing to promote it due to political considerations. Netanyahu did not advance the matter strongly enough. So just to underscore again, Benny Gantz, who is no dove here, who very much supported the war as part of the war cabinet, has no issue with the level of civilian death and mayhem, says that Bibi is one of the key actors responsible for blocking a hostage deal that could bring those Israeli hostages home. So to hear from him, very noteworthy. He also apparently refuted claims of being a mouthpiece for the Biden administration, saying, quote, "I am not an envoy of the U.S. government. Stop inventing such claims." He also expressed regret that Bibi didn't utilize his connections with the Americans, noting, quote, "They in the U.S. were impressed with how I am more militant than Netanyahu." So, that's the nature of the debate there, him positioning himself as more warlike than Bibi Netanyahu himself. Reflecting on the day after a potential resolution, Gantz said, "Palestinian forces will receive international support. We told Bibi that we needed to deal with the day after because it is a complex matter that won't solve itself. The fact we didn't deal with it only delayed the security. Meanwhile, a vacuum and chaos will be created and the soldiers will continue to fight," which, of course, for Bibi and others who want to forestall any sort of reckoning over their own security failures on October 7th, and Bibi, who wants to also keep his own ass out of prison, facing potential corruption charges, continuing the war is, of course, the point. And the chaos and the need to, go back in only helps to serve Bibi Netanyahu, even as it does not serve, certainly, is disastrous for Palestinians in Gaza, disastrous for the world and the potential escalation that we were just talking about vis-a-vis Iran and Lebanon, et cetera, and also disastrous for Israelis and their current and future security situation and their goal, which is overwhelmingly shared by the Israeli population, of returning the hostages.
Yeah, that's going to be the major political weapon against him, is that any acknowledgement by people who are in the war cabinet, and now the war cabinet has been dissolved, who are like, yeah, he didn't do enough to free the hostages. That is just an absolute electoral massive problem for him in any future election. But there has to be a future election, and that is something that he's working overtime. A war would be very good for him, to continue to say, oh, it's not the right time. We could talk about that after the war. It's day 254 of the war, or whatever, 255, I guess now, at this point. So at what point, Bibi, are we allowed to discuss this? And he wants to make sure that point is as far away as possible. Every day, he gets to live another day.
Yes. So at the same time, we had to share with you some of the tenor of discourse on Hebrew language television on Israel's most watched news show. We can put this up on the screen because it's in Hebrew. Let me just read. And by this was confirmed by Haaretz and other Israeli outlets that this is what was actually said. This individual, who is a former Likud MP, invokes Hitler to justify Gaza resettlement. He says, as Hitler said, "I cannot live if one Jew is left. We can't live here if one Islamo-Nazi remains in Gaza." So, Saagar, we now have an analyst here, former Likud, which is, again, Benjamin Netanyahu's party, former Likud MP, favorably invoking Hitler's ideology to justify his view of what should be done in Gaza. It speaks for itself.
Truth stranger than fiction, I guess you could say. And on the most popular news show also in the channel. This is what I always am shocked by with them, is like they really don't think that there are people who speak both languages and who are opposed to them and can't hit a very basic translate. But yeah, apparently they think, look, at the same time, like they've mostly gotten away with whatever they want to so far. So right. Why should they care about any supposed consequences?
Yes, that's right. And meanwhile, we need to have a national crisis every time there's a sign on a college campus that's, a little off-putting to some community or another. And this guy goes on, is literally like, hey, we should do to Gaza what Hitler did to the Jews. He had it right with that. It's like, what? How did we get here? And I think it's not that they don't realize that we can hear them. It's that, as you said, there's been total impunity. None of this has been with any sort of real consequence, at least vis-a-vis the U.S. And second of all, for whatever domestic constituency this individual is trying to please, they probably agreed.
Yeah, they
probably,
like it.
Yeah. He knows the audience he's talking to. So, for his own domestic political purposes and to get invited back on what is apparently Israel's most watched news show, this is the type of outrageous insanity that you put out into the world.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.